Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today in this session. So today in this session we are going to begin solving the tasks on this project, C variadic functions. In the introductory part of this project, we've explained what variadic functions are. We said a variadic function is simply a function that takes in a variable number of arguments. So it means it can take any number of arguments, right? And we've seen example of a variadic function. We said the printf is the most commonly used variadic function because it can take any number of arguments of different data types, right? So today we're going to begin solving the tasks. So before everything, let me open my header file. The header file is variadic function.h. Take note of this, not main.h again. So I already have the header file here. So in this video, I'm expecting us to solve tasks 0 and 1. So I have the prototypes inside the variadic function.h header file. Okay. All right. So let's begin solving the tasks. So let's go to task 0. It says we should write a function that returns the sum of all its parameters, right? So it means that the function is going to take parameters, and these parameters are going to be summed together, and at the end you should return the value of the summation. Do you get it? So how do we do this first? Let's open the file. There's the file name 0sum.c. So 0, so I already have Betty documented here so that we will not be taking time explaining or writing Betty again. All right, so what's the first thing we need to do here? The first thing we need to do here is I need to declare an extra variable. And what this variable is going to do is it is going to hold the total summation of this argument, of these parameters, okay? I will just declare it, and the function of this variable is just going to be, it is going to hold the result of what? Of the summation. Do you get it? So I'm going to call it, let's say sum. So int sum, and I will initialize it to 0. Sum, and I will initialize it to 0, right? So the next thing I need to do is what? I need to declare an extra variable I, in which I'm going to use to loop. This is a variadic function, right? It is a variadic function. So I need to loop. When you look at this, this is n. This int n, I've already explained this when we're talking about, when we're introducing this project, that anything that comes, any parameter or variable that comes before this ellipsis is the number of arguments that the function is going to take. So in this case, whatever the value of n is, it means this is the number of arguments that the function is going to take, right? So it means that I need to loop how many times? N times. Or if I'm to run a loop, I need to loop how many times? N times. Because n is the number of arguments that the function is going to take, right? So I need to declare a variable. So let me call it I. I'm going to use this for my looping. Do you get it? So what is the next thing we need to do? The next thing we need to do is we need to var list. We need to declare the variable, right? We need to declare the variable that we're going to use for what? In this variadic function. I've already explained it in the introductory part. So this is what? Var list, right? So what name should we give it? Let me call it arg. So var list arg. So this arg here is going to hold what? The argument. This is the variable that is going to hold all the argument that is passed to the function. Okay, it will be stored in this variable arg. So now I have arg, right? So what's the next thing we need to do? The next thing we need to do is when you look at this, it says if n is equals to 0, we should return 0, right? So I will simply say if n, that is if the number of argument is 0. If n is equals to 0, so what should I do? Sorry, I will just say return what? A 0, right? So I'm done with this part, isn't it? So what's the next thing we need to do? So the next thing we need to do is what? Is we need to var start. We need to start the variadic function, right? And var start takes in what? 2 arguments. We said the first argument is what? Is the variable that holds what? The argument. In this case, we declared which variable? Arg, isn't it? So here I'll just say arg, and then what? You need to pass in the number of arguments that are stored inside the variable. And which variable is holding the number of arguments? Our n here, right? So I pass in n. So this is just saying, okay, I want you to get n number of parameters inside arg here. Do you get it? That's just what var start does. So the next thing we need to do is we need to loop over what? Over n entirely, right? So for each iteration, we are going to sum them, isn't it? So for each iteration, we are going to sum the value, right? So that's why I created this variable here, sum is equals to 0. So all I need to do here is I'll just say for I equals to 0, I'm starting from 0. So what should be the condition? Since I'm starting from 0, I has to be less than n, isn't it? I started from 1, I would say I less than or equals to n. But in this case, I has to be less than n. If you count, assuming n is 3, 0 to 2, that will give you 3. If you count including 3, you will get 4, right? So I plus plus, isn't it? So now I have this. So what should we do inside this loop? In this loop, I've already created this variable sum, right? And for each iteration, we want to add the value of that parameter to what? To sum, isn't it? So what I'm going to do here, I'll just say sum is equals to, right? Is equals to what? Initially, the value of sum is 0, right? Initially, the value of sum is 0. So I will now call my vararg in this case, isn't it? What does vararg does? I've already explained this, that vararg is just like a loop, isn't it? It is going to loop over the entire what? The entire argument you have here, right? So I'll just call in vararg, and then I'll pass in the variable name that is holding the argument, which is arg here, right? So I'll say arg, and then comma, I need to pass in the data type that I want vararg to fetch for me. Vararg itself is just like a loop. It is going to go into this variable that holds the argument, and then it will look for whatever data type you pass as the second argument here. So in this case, we are looking for what? Numbers, which are integers, right? Integers. So I'll just pass in int here. So vararg will go and look for what? Any integer value inside our argument arg. Do you get it? But there is something we need to do here. Here, for the first iteration, sum will hold the value that vararg is going to fetch, right? It is going to fetch an integer, definitely. So if it fetches that integer, the value of sum will be updated. So if it moves to the next iteration, the value will be overwritten with the value of the second iteration. And that's not what we want. We want to add what? Sum plus this. So it means that if the value of sum is updated in the first iteration, when the second iteration comes, it is going to add the previous value of sum to what? To whatever vararg returns, and then update the value of sum again. So that way we will be having what? We will be having the summation of the argument one by one, right? So what's the next thing we need to do now? The next thing we need to do is to end our variadic function, which is called varEnd. And here you now need to pass the variable that you declared using varlist, right? Which is arg in this case, isn't it? So what's the next thing? I will just return, because the function says returns the sum of all its parameters. So I'm going to return what? Sum, because sum is the variable that holds the sum of all the parameters, isn't it? So return sum. Okay, so I believe this is very clear, right? We declared what? Our variable using varlist, which is going to hold what? The number of arguments, or it's going to hold the argument, and we set this condition from the question. So we need to start, right? So what does var start does? It goes into this variable that holds the argument, and it is going to what? Check for n number of argument inside, and it will loop over it, and then it will sum everything. Okay, it will sum them. Vararg here is simply used to get integer values from what? From the variable that holds the argument, right? So at the end, you need to end your vararg, sorry, your variadic function, and then you need to return the sum. Okay, so now let's run Betty on this. So Betty, there was some. All right, so let's create the test file now. So this is it. So vi 0 main.c. All right, so pastes. Okay. All right, there is something I forgot actually. For us to use variadic function, we need to include the stdarg.h header file. So I simply go and do that inside my header file here. So here I'll just say hash include stdarg, right, .h. Also, there is something I just realized. Let's go back to our file. Some here. Here, when you look at this, n here is what? Is an unsigned int, isn't it? And I here has been declared as what? As an int. So I cannot do this comparison because they are of different data type. So all I'm going to do here is simply add an unsigned here. So I'll just say unsigned int. That's all. So now this is going to work. I hope so. So let's run. Okay, we've run Betty already. So the next thing we need to do is just compile our program. So let's copy this. So as you can see, it has been compiled. So let's run the compiled file. All right, so as you can see, we got 1122500. This is the exact value here, right? So when you sum this 298, 1024, you're going to get 1122, and when you sum this, you are going to get what? 500. Okay, so this is simply how to do this. So don't forget to add commit and push to your GitHub, and then you can run your checks. So let's move on to the next task.
So before we continue, let me quickly pass this information. For those interested in our C mentorship program, the course application for the 7th batch is currently open. So kindly go to bitweblearn.com.ng, which is our newly launched learning management system, and then go to courses. Under courses, you'll be able to see ALX Complete C programming course. So because I'm already logged in, that's why I'm seeing continue learning here. In your own case, you will see start learning. Okay, so if I click on continue learning now, so as you can see, I have the project here. These are the first ones created: how to clear repositories, hello world, how to install Betty, all this. These are all the ALX project. As you can see here, we have them on this website. Okay, so for instance, if I want to access the small functions, more nested loops, I will just click on this, and as you can see, all the materials are here. Okay, so here as well, if I want to access functions and nested loops, all the course materials are here. So if you're really interested in taking part in this mentorship program, kindly message me using the WhatsApp link in the description of this video, and then I will share a coupon code which will give you a 30% discount on this course. Believe me, this course is very affordable. Okay, also, if you have a course that you want to sell on this website, you can register as an instructor. Simply come here and then you can click on instructor registration. You can register as an instructor. Because I've already registered, that's why you're seeing you are not registered as an instructor. In your own case, you'll see a registration form which you need to fill. Okay, so after filling the registration form and after uploading your course, the course will be reviewed, and once everything is fine, we are going to make it available for others to have access to. Okay, so if there is any inquiry you want about being an instructor or enrolling in the C programming course, kindly message me, like I said, using the WhatsApp link in the description of this video, and I will answer your question, and also I will share the coupon code that you need to get 30% discount on our mentorship program. So thank you very much, and let's continue. So this task here says we should write a function that prints numbers followed by a new line. So in this case, we are going to print the numbers, right? So this is the prototype where separator, that is this parameter here, is the string to be printed between the numbers. So after printing a number, then separator will be printed before printing the next one. Where separator is the string to be printed between numbers, and n is the number of integers passed to the function. We already know that. As you can see, n is appearing before what the ellipse is here. So it is definitely keeping count of the number of argument that the function takes. So you are allowed to use printf. Thank you very much. If separator is null, don't print it. Do you get it? So it means we are only going to print the separator if it is not equal to null. So print a new line at the end of your function. Let's just look at the example here. As you can see, this is what was passed to the function, and this is what got printed. So this first parameter is the separator, right? This second parameter here is n, the number of arguments. So as you can see, we have 4 arguments passed. So that's why 4 is passed here. So after printing the first one, did you see that the separator comma was printed, because comma is passed as the separator here, which is the first parameter. Same 98, after 98, comma, which is the separator, same as this, but the last case here does not have the comma because it is the last element. So this is exactly what we're going to do. So this is a bit similar to the previous one. In the previous case, what we did is that inside the loop, we will sum all the parameters, right? So in this case, what we are going to do, inside the loop, we are not going to sum the parameters. Instead, we are going to print them with the separators, okay? So as you can see here, I already have my Betty documented. I opened the file already. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to declare the variable I, in which we're going to use for the looping, right? So I'll just say int. Okay, as you can see here, n is also what? An unsigned int, right? And I'm going to compare it with what? With an unsigned value. So I will just say unsigned int I, right? So I can now compare this with what? With the variable n. So the next thing we're going to do is to declare our variadic variable, right? Which is what? Done using valid. So I'm going to call it arg as well in this case. You can give it any name, okay? I just like using arg. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to what? Var start. Right? So var start is going to tell what? Variadic function that, okay, I want you to consider this a variable which holds the argument, which is arg, and it has n number of argument, isn't it? So that's what var start does. So the next we need to do is to loop, right? So I'll just say for I equals to 0. What should be the condition? I has to be less than n, right? We are looping
to n. We cannot exceed n because n is the number of argument that is stored in arg. Isn't it the number of parameters that the function takes, right? So I plus plus. Now I have this for loop. So what are we going to put inside this loop? When you look at this, we are given a condition that if separator is null, don't print the separator. So we are only interested in printing the separator if it is not null, right? So I just pass in this condition. I will say if separator is not equals to null. If it is not equals to null, that is when I want to print it, right? If it is not equals to null, what should happen? If it is not equals to null, I first want to print the number. Just look at what happened here. The number was printed first, then the separator. The number again, then the separator. That's what I want to do, right? So if it is not null, let's do this. So the first thing I need to do is to print the number, right? So I'll just say printf. I will pass in %s, right? Sorry, %d. It's a number, right? So %d, and then what again? We need to now what? Call vararg, right? We need to call vararg now, and vararg is responsible for fetching the number that we want to print. I've already explained this. So I'll just say vararg here, and then I will pass in what? What does vararg take? Vararg takes in two parameters. The first parameter is the variable that holds the argument in which you want to fetch, which is arg in this case. And the next argument is what is the data type you want to fetch. In this case, we are fetching numbers, right? So I pass in int. Do you get it? So I will pass in integer here. So it will first print what? The number. After printing the number, then we will now print the separator. So I'll just say printf. Now we are printing separator, right? So I will use what? %s, right? Because it is not an integer. So %s. So here, what should I put? I'll just say separator. So whatever the separator is, it is going to be printed immediately after printing the number. I believe this is clear, right? So else, that is if separator is null. If separator is null, we are just told not to print it. So it means we are just going to print the number, but we are not going to print the separator, right? We are just going to print the number, don't print the separator. So I'll just say printf here. So %d, right? So I'll call my vararg and then pass in the argument, which is arg and also integer. So this is going to print the number only, but the separator is not going to be printed. In this if statement, we said if separator is not equals to null. If the separator is not null, it will first print the number and then print the separator. But in the else part, that is if the separator is null, it is only the number we want to print. Isn't it? That's just what we want. So that's all for this. So the next thing we need to do is to end it, right? So I'll just say, oh, before that, we need to print it in a new line, right? It says what? Where is it? Followed by a new line. Right, it says followed by a new line, and it says we can use what? We can use printf. I can even use putka if I like. So I'll just say putka, and then I'll pass in /n. Okay, so now this is going to print a new line. So the next thing is what? var end. We need to end it since we've started. So I will just say what? Arg here. Sorry, arg. All right, so that's simply how to do this. Okay, that's simply what we're asked to do here. So as you can see, our function is returning void, so there is no need for us to return anything here. So let's test the program. Before that, let's include the stdio.h since we've used printf, right? So I will just say hash include stdio.h, right? So there is no need for me to include stdio because it is already inside my header file, variadic functions.h. So what's the next thing? I think that's fine. So let's run Betty on this one print. Okay, as you can see, Betty is happy with this as well. So let's create the test file and then let's check the program if it's working. One main.c, right? All right, so paste. All right, so let's check. So what should we do now? Compile, right? So let's compile, copy and paste. Okay, it says what? Separator undeclared. Okay, I misspelled it. Actually. So what was the file name? Okay, one print something. All right, so here I misspelled separator. Okay, yeah, I'm just seeing that. All right. So let's compile. So as you can see, it has been compiled. I'm sure this program is not going to give us the exact output. I just want to show you something. So press enter. So as you can see, we got 0, 98, all these things, we have them. But at the end, we have a comma. And we are supposed to get rid of this comma. So how do we get rid of this comma at the end? So it means that we need to consider another condition, right? So we need to consider another condition. So what do we need to do now? Here, when you look at this, all I'm going to do here is before printing the separator, in this case, I need to add a condition, right? I don't want the separator printed at the end of the last number, isn't it? So how can I target the last number? I can simply say if the value of I, right, since I'm looping, if the value of I is not equals to n minus 1, that is the only case I want to print what? This separator. If it is less than, if it is equals to n minus 1, then it will not be printed. So what did I do here? I said if I is not equals to n minus 1, what is n minus 1? Assuming my n here, just like this here, my n is 4. So 4 minus 1 is 3, isn't it? So if you count, we have 1, 2, 3, right? So it means it will not consider this one, this last one, right? So if it is not equals to n minus 1, that is, if it is not equals to 3, I'm talking about this case now. If it is not equals to 3, that is only when I want the separator to be printed. So it will not get the separator printed for this. Instead, it will get the separator printed for this ones, because it is 3. 1, 2, 3. Do you get it? If it is not equals to 3, it will print this. If it is equals to 3, that is the second to the last, or the last element, it will not print what? The separator. That's just what I did here. This is simply conditional execution. We are not supposed to be taking time explaining this. So let's check again, or let's compile. Alright, so dash b. So as you can see now, we have the comma gone at the end of this parameter here, or the end of this argument. Okay, so that's simply how to do this. Don't forget to add commit and push to GitHub, and then you can run your checks. Alright, before we end, you can also get the complete ALX C programming course from our website, bitweblearn.com.ng, at a very, very affordable price. You can message me on WhatsApp. I'll leave the link in the description of this video. I'm going to share the coupon code that you can use to get 30% off on this purchase. So this course contains the complete ALX programming course on C programming. Okay, so ALX course on C programming, that of Python will be uploaded on the website as well as soon as possible. So we're going to stop here. In the next video, we are going to continue from task 2 of this project. But unfortunately, this task 2 will only be available on our website. Okay, so it will not be uploaded here on YouTube. Instead, it will be available on the website. So thank you very much. Till we meet in our next project.